Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Later, we'll be hearing from Madison County Judge Executive Reagan Taylor, who has put extensive work into dealing with his community's drug problem. It includes plans for a new detention center that will also be a treatment facility for those who are addicted and in need of major course corrections in their lives. That is later. But first, President Trump has scrapped former President Obama's Clean Power Plan designed to cut carbon emissions. Mr. Trump has promised to bring coal mining jobs back, and some in Kentucky are counting on that happening. Environmental groups don't like the changes. They say it will hurt the environment and won't do much for the economy. Tyler White is with us from the Kentucky Coal Association after having been in Washington when the president made the changes. And just before we hear from him, environmental groups in Kentucky are also speaking out. We heard this from the Kentuckians for the Commonwealth in reaction.
This does nothing for miners, this does nothing for workers, this does nothing for families that have really built the American economy through their efforts to mine coal, to power the Industrial Revolution, and made a lot of sacrifices, and this does nothing to help those communities.
That was Chris Porter there from Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. Now we're joined by Mr. White, who's with the Kentucky Coal Association. What is your reaction? I would think it is much different from that on the president's move on coal and carbon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bill, for having me on the show today. This is monumental for the coal industry, not just here in Kentucky, but for the coal industry across America. And I know that people criticize this, saying that, you know, it's going to be detrimental to the environment. What I would say to this, to that statement, is for too long we have been picking one above the other. Is it the environment, or is it people? And we need to start exploring policies that look at both of them. The coal community is not against the environment. This is the same environment and the same water that our miners send their kids to school in these communities. We don't want to do things that are detrimental to the environment, but we also do not want to do anything that is detrimental to the life and well-being and the ability for people to achieve upward mobility in these communities. And the policies that were enacted over the last 8 years by the Obama administration did just that. It limited growth, it stifled initiative, and it took away opportunity from people that needed it the most.
For 30 years or more, there has been talk of clean coal technology. That is, you know, going to the expense of scrubbing the pollutants out of coal. Is that feasible? Is it? Are we to a point now that it might be possible to burn coal more cleanly and economically? Absolutely.
We've had these innovations and these technologies that we've adapted to our coal-fired power plants over a number of years that have greatly reduced different emissions. But what I would say to that is, it's important to understand that at some point you get to a point of diminishing returns. And we shouldn't enact policies that artificially handicap an entire industry at the expense of one energy source above the other. And especially when we talk about government regulations. Government regulations should not be picking winners and losers in our energy sector. It's not fair to the people that produce that energy, and it's also not fair to the people that use that energy.
Do you need to, as head of the Kentucky Coal Association, manage expectations here in the Commonwealth about jobs returning, given that regulations are just a part of the equation? Market forces are at play. We know that coal-fired power plants are being replaced with other means.
So one of the things I like to point out in terms of the coal industry and what's happened over at least the last 8 years is there are both market factors and non-market factors at play. It wasn't just a market factor that contributed to the decline that we've seen over the last 8 years. The market factor would be low natural gas prices. Through technology and innovation, we have seen a shell revelation, which has essentially allowed for cheap natural gas, market force. A non-market force would be over-regulating the coal industry through plans like we saw with the stream buffer rule that came out of the Office of Surface Mining and was repealed by President Trump in February, or the Clean Power Plan, again, another example of a regulation picking winners and losers. So it's a combination of both market forces and non-market forces that creates that perfect storm that really handicaps this particular industry. So if we're able to eliminate some of those non-market forces and allow coal to once again compete on the market, we feel confident that coal will compete. Now, with regards to managing expectations, it is important to understand that coal production here in Kentucky, even between 2015 and over 2016, declined 28%. That's a major, major hit to the industry. So the first priority that we need to do in the coal industry is stop the bleeding, stop that downward trajectory. And we do that through enacting policies that we've seen enacted in Washington and over these past couple of months. From there, we will look to make incremental and sustainable. I want to emphasize that, sustainable increases to the industry. Now, I will tell you this: we have seen mines opening in eastern Kentucky, and we have seen an uptick in employment. Now, I'm waiting to see what the data looks like, because I don't know if the employment uptick will even out what the cuts have been.
Well, Mr. White, you also, again, as you've acknowledged here, it's a long way back. Would you advise these Kentucky communities that have depended on coal for many years and who in these days are just, in a horrible recession, if not depressive situation, to look at other alternatives as well in revitalizing their economy?
I think that diversification is paramount for all, not just communities, but also for the energy sector. I'm the same approach that I argue for coal is that allow it to compete. And the way you do that is you don't just have coal, you have natural gas, you have hydro, you have solar, where it makes sense for those energy sources to be used. And I would say the same thing, the same philosophy to go into each of these communities. We should, and I applaud the work that's been done in some of these communities with Congressman Rogers and looking at bringing high-tech jobs and looking at some of the coding that's going on, some of the coding schools that are taking our miners and teaching them how to code. So I think that's wonderful efforts.
The environmental groups are not going away by any means. Do you anticipate a major legal challenge going forward that may in fact be successful?
I don't think that they will be successful, and the reason I don't think they'll be successful, and I do expect legal challenges to this, is that it's important to understand the Clean Power Plan was actually stayed by the Supreme Court. And one of the reasons it was stayed by the Supreme Court of the United States was because the Supreme Court looked and said, is the environmental impact that they're saying we're going to achieve, what does it outweigh the economic strife that it will put on the country? And I'm confident that it didn't. In fact, to the EPA's own admission, the net effect to global emissions would have been minuscule by the policy of the Clean Power Plan. So we think this is a very common sense executive order that was put forth that allows us to continue to provide affordable and reliable energy, which we think is the key to helping people move upward, because affordable and reliable energy helps people in this state, or helps us attract business, attract manufacturing businesses. And those businesses mean jobs. And jobs mean opportunity, and opportunity means upward mobility.
You're having to watch two capitals, not only Washington, where this happened, but also Frankfurt, where the legislature is busy right now. There is a House Bill 384 that is supposed to address mine safety. We know that as we were taping this program, we learned of a mining fatality in southern Kentucky. Does that take away some of the inspections?
You know, House Bill 3, and first, our thoughts and prayers go out to the family of that miner. and all of our miners. It is very important work they do. It is dangerous work they do, which is why House Bill 384 was introduced. Right now, we see a lot of duplicative work being done from the state side. The same work that's being done from the federal side. Now, the federal inspections are done by MSHA, the Mine Safety Health Administration. And what we want to make sure that we're doing here in Kentucky is not duplicating efforts, but looking at safety in a more common sense way. So what this legislation does is it allows the cabinet to repurpose one of the inspections, and I like to say repurpose. Critics out there will say it eliminates one. It repurposes one to, instead of look at conditions, the same thing that MSHA looks at, to look at human behavior. So the inspector still spends the exact same amount of time in the mines, except this time, instead of looking at conditions and going through a checklist, they'll actually monitor the behavior of that miner. Now, why is that important? Through certain studies, we've seen that over 90% of accidents that happen in mines are not condition related. They're actually related to miner behavior. So if we're able to go in and look at behavior and why the human error that's causing some of these accidents, we believe that that will in fact make our mines safer and is a more futuristic and logical approach to mine safety as we enter the next revelation.
There will be one less check though on the equipment, right, that they use?
It will, what it will do is it will repurpose the inspections to allow them to look at behavior.
But the answer is yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it very much. And I know you have your work cut out for you and a difficult lobbying job that you have. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you so much.
Hope you keep